Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me? All right, today we are reading chapter 23. Anne comes to grief in an affair of honor. 네, grief는 아주 슬픈 일 혹은 안 좋은 일이죠. 안 좋은 거. In an affair of honor. 이 명예의 일과 관련해서. All right, let's go. Anne had to live through more than 2 weeks as it happened. 네, live through more than 2 weeks. 2주나 더 살아야 됐어요. 이게 무슨 말이죠? 그 전 chapter 보시면 I really don't see how I'm going to live through the 2 weeks before school begins. 학교 시작하기 2주나 남았는데 내가 어떻게 2주를 기다리나 모르겠어. 했는데 이제 2주가 거의 다 됐어요. No. Had to live through more than 2 weeks. 2주 이상을 살아야 됐다는 거죠. Almost a month having elapsed since the liniment cake episode, it was high time for her to get into fresh trouble of some sort. Little mistakes, such as absent-mindedly emptying a pan of skim milk into a basket of yarn balls in the pantry instead of into the pig's bucket, and walking clean over the edge of the log bridge into the brook, while wrapped in imaginative reverie, not really being worth counting. All right. 네, 그 케이크에다가 약을 넣은 에피소드는 거의 한 달이 지나갔기 때문에 이제 또 사고 칠 날이 왔어요. 왜냐면이 아니라 그냥 작은 실수들, 예를 들어 little mistakes such as 우유를 털실 있는 데다가 버린다든지 아니면 어디에 이상한 데로 걸어간다든지. All right. A week after the tea at the manse, Diana Barry gave a party. Small and select, Anne assured Marilla. Just the girls in her class. 네, 다이아나가 이제 파티를 열기로 했죠. They had a very good time and nothing untoward happened until after tea when they found themselves in the berry garden, a little tired of all their games and ripe for an enticing form of mischief which might present itself. This presently took the form of daring. Now, nothing untoward happened. untoward는 안 좋은, 예상하지 않은 안 좋은 일입니다. daring은 I dare you to 뭐 jump off the bridge 하면 네가 bridge 다리에서 점프하는 거를 너 못하지? 한번 해봐. 이렇게 하는 게 daring입니다. Daring was the fashionable amusement among the Avonlea small fry just then. It had begun among the boys, but soon spread to the girls, and all the silly things that were done in Avonlea that summer because the doers thereof were dared to do them would fill a book by themselves. 네, 남자들이 먼저 시작을 했는데 이제 여자애들까지 이제 옮아왔어요. Daring 하는 거. First of all, Carrie Sloane dared Ruby Gillis to climb to a certain point in the huge old willow tree before the front door, which Ruby Gillis, albeit in mortal dread of the fat green caterpillars with which said tree was infested, and with the fear of her mother before her eyes, if she should tear her new muslin dress, nimbly did, to the discomfiture of the aforesaid Carrie Sloane. 네, Carrie가 루비한테 너 저 나무 못하지? 그랬는데 루비는 mortal dread, 완전 너무 무서워하는데 뭐를? Fat green caterpillar. 애벌레, 맞죠? With said tree라고 하면 나무가 말했다? 이게 아니라 said tree, 금방 말한 나무. 그죠? 그래서 to the discomfiture of the aforesaid Carrie Sloane. 아까 말한 Carrie Sloane. 그래서 said 하면은 누가 아까 말한 이런 뜻입니다. Then Josie Pie dared Jane Andrews to hop on her left leg around the garden without stopping once or putting her right foot to the ground, which Jane Andrews gamely tried to do, but gave out at the third corner and had to confess herself defeated. Josie's triumph being rather more pronounced than good taste permitted, Anne Shirley dared her to walk along the top of the board fence which bounded the garden to the east. Now, to walk board fences requires more skill and steadiness of head and heel than one might suppose who has never tried it. 네, 어디 울타리 위에 걸어보라고 했어요. But Josie Pie, if deficient in some qualities that make for popularity, had at least a natural and inborn gift duly cultivated for walking board fences. 네, deficient, 뭐가 모자라다. 뭐가 모자라다? 어떤 인품들, 인기를 갖기 위한 quality들은 모자라더라도 natural and inborn gift, 완전 탤런트가 있었대요. 왜? For walking board fences. Josie walked the berry fence with an airy unconcern which seemed to imply that a little thing like that wasn't worth a dare. Reluctant admiration greeted her exploit, for most of the other girls could appreciate it, having suffered many things themselves in their efforts to walk fences. Josie descended from her perch, flushed with victory, and darted a defiant glance at Anne. 성공을 했죠? Anne tossed her red braids. 던졌다는 거예요. Red braids, 빨간 딴머리. I don't think it's such a very wonderful thing to walk a little low board fence, she said. 그렇게 낮은 울타리 걷는 거는 그렇게 멋진 일인 것 같진 않아. I knew a girl in Marysville who could walk the ridgepole of a roof. roof는 what is roof? 갑자기 생각이 안 나네요. 지붕 위를 걷는 여자애 난 봤어. I don't believe it, said Josie flatly. I don't believe anybody could walk a ridgepole. You couldn't anyhow. 아무도 그거를 지붕을 걸을 수 있다는 거 나는 못 믿어. 그런데 특히 너는 더 못할걸? Couldn't I? cried Anne rashly. 내가 못한다고? Then I dare you to do it, said Josie defiantly. I dare you to climb up there and walk the ridgepole of Mr. Barry's kitchen roof. 이제 dare 했죠. Anne을 거기 지붕 위에 걸어보라고. Anne turned pale, but there was clearly only one thing to be done. She walked towards the house, where a ladder was leaning against the kitchen roof. All the fifth-class girls said, "Oh," partly in excitement, partly in dismay. 반은 신나서, 반은 무서워서. 안 돼! 이런 생각 때문에. Don't you do it, Anne, entreated Diana. You'll fall off and be killed. Never mind Josie Pie. It isn't fair to dare anybody to do anything so dangerous. I must do it. My honor is at stake. 내 명예가 걸려있는 일이야, said Anne solemnly. I shall walk that ridgepole, Diana, or perish in the attempt. If I am killed, you are to have my pearl bead ring. 내가 죽으면 pearl, 진주 반지를 가지렴. Anne climbed the ladder amid breathless silence, gained the ridgepole, balanced herself uprightly on that precarious footing, and started to walk along it, dizzily conscious that she was uncomfortably high up in the world, and that walking ridgepoles was not a thing in which your imagination helped you out much. 네, gained the ridgepole. 네, gained는 뭘 얻었다는 뜻인데 여기서는 올라갔다라는 뜻입니다. dizzily conscious. 알고 있었어요. 상상력은 지붕 위에 걷는 거에 도움이 안 됐다는 거. Nevertheless, she managed to take several steps before the catastrophe came. 참사가 일어나기 전에 몇 발자국은 갔어요. Then she swayed, lost her balance, stumbled, staggered, and fell, sliding down over the sun-baked roof and crashing off it through the tangle of Virginia creeper beneath, all before the dismayed circle below could give a simultaneous, terrified shriek. 네, 떨어졌죠. Virginia creeper, 이거는 덩굴 식물입니다. If Anne had tumbled off the roof on the side up which she ascended, Diana would probably have fallen heir to the pearl bead ring then and there. 이게 무슨 말일까요? 자, 올라간 쪽으로 떨어졌더라면 다이아나가 그 진주 반지를 바로 그 자리에서 상속을 했을 텐데, 상속을 받았을 텐데, fortunately, she fell on the other side. 다른 쪽으로 떨어졌어요. Where the roof extended down over the porch so nearly to the ground that a fall therefrom was a much less serious thing. Nevertheless, when Diana and the other girls had rushed frantically around the house, except Ruby Gillis, who remained as if rooted to the ground and went into hysterics, they found Anne lying all white and limp among the wreck and ruin of the Virginia creeper. 네, 다들 뛰어갔어요. 누구 빼놓고? Ruby Gillis. Ruby Gillis는 rooted to the ground. 땅에 뿌리가 박힌 것처럼 꼼짝을 안 했다는 거죠. Anne, are you killed? Shrieked Diana, throwing herself on her knees beside her friend. Oh, Anne, dear Anne, speak just one word to me and tell me if you're killed. 죽었어, Anne, 죽었어? 한마디만 말해봐, 죽었는지. To the immense relief of all the girls, and especially of Josie Pie, who, in spite of lack of imagination, had been seized with horrible visions of a future branded as the girl who was the cause of Anne Shirley's early and tragic death, Anne sat dizzily up and answered uncertainly. 네, to the immense relief. 모든 여자애들의, 소녀들의 안도를 했었다는 거죠. 누구 특히? Josie Pie. 왜냐하면 seized with horrible visions. 미래의 Anne Shirley의 비극적이고 너무 이른 죽음을 이르게 한 낙인을 찍힌 것을 상상을 한 거죠. Anne sat dizzily up and answered uncertainly. No, Diana, I am not killed, but I think I am rendered unconscious. No, Diana, 난 죽진 않았지만 의식을 잃은 것 같아. 그러면서 말을 한 거죠. 웃긴 거죠. Where? sobbed Carrie Sloane. Oh, where, Anne? 네, 이렇게 어디 한 거 보니까 rendered unconscious 이 말을 무슨 뜻인지 모르는 것 같죠. Before Anne could answer, Mrs. Barry appeared on the scene. At sight of her, Anne tried to scramble to her feet, but sank back again with a sharp little cry of pain. What's the matter? Where have you hurt yourself? Demanded Mrs. Barry. My ankle, gasped Anne. Oh, Diana, please find your father and ask him to take me home. I know I can never walk there. And I'm sure I couldn't hop so far on one foot when Jane couldn't even hop around the garden. Diana, 아버지 좀 날 집에 데려가 달라고 해줘. 나 절대로 집까지 못 걸어갈 것 같아. 그리고 한 발로 깡충깡충 못 뛸 것 같아. 제이는 정원도 못 걸었는데 한 발로. Marilla was out in the orchard, picking a panful of summer apples when she saw Mr. Barry coming over the log bridge and up the slope with Mrs. Barry beside him and a whole procession of little girls trailing after him. In his arms he carried Anne, whose head lay limply against his shoulder. 네, Mr. Barry가 이렇게 안고 있었죠, Anne을. 그리고 Anne은 이렇게 힘없이 기대고 있었어요, 어깨에. At that moment, Marilla had a revelation. 그 순간에 Marilla는 계시가 있었어요. 어떤 계시? In the sudden stab of fear that pierced to her very heart, she realized what Anne had come to mean to her. 그 순간에 갑자기 너무 놀라서 Anne이 자기한테 어떤 존재인지를 알게 됐죠. She would have admitted that she liked Anne. Nay, that she was very fond of Anne. 인정을 했을 거예요. Anne을 좋아한다고. 아니, nay는 아니라는 뜻입니다. 아주 정들었다는 거. But now she knew as she hurried wildly down the slope that Anne was dearer to her than anything on earth. 그냥 좋아하는 정도? 그리고 되게 정들었는데 이제 알게 됐어요. 세상에서 무엇보다 Annie 제일 소중하다는 거. Mr. Barry, what has happened to her? She gasped, more white and shaken than the self-contained, sensible Marilla had been for many years. Anne herself answered, lifting her head. Don't be very frightened, Marilla. I was walking the ridgepole and I fell off. I expect I've sprained my ankle. Sprained my ankle. 발목을 삔 것 같아요. But Marilla, I might have broken my neck. Let us look on the bright side of things. 발목은 삐었는데 사실 목을 부러뜨릴 뻔했어요. 그러니까 우리 좋게 생각합시다. I might have known you'd go and do something of the sort when I let you go to that party, said Marilla, sharp and shrewish in her very relief. 너무 다행이라고 생각하는 만큼 말이 엄청 날카롭게 나왔어요. Bring her in here, Mr. Barry, and lay her on the sofa. Mercy me, the child has gone and fainted. It was quite true. Overcome by the pain of her injury, Anne had one more of her wishes granted to her. She had fainted dead away. 네, 너무 아파서 소원이 하나 이루어졌어요. 소원이 뭐였죠? 기절해보는 거. Matthew, hastily summoned from the harvest field, was straightway dispatched for the doctor, who in due time came to discover that the injury was more serious than they had supposed. Anne's ankle was broken. 네, 삔 게 아니라 부러진 거였어요. That night, when Marilla went up to the east gable, where a white-faced girl was lying, a plaintive voice greeted her from the bed. Aren't you very sorry for me, Marilla? 저 불쌍하지 않아요? It was your own fault, said Marilla, twitching down the blind and lighting a lamp. And that is just why you should be sorry for me, said Anne, because the thought that it is all my own fault is what makes it so hard. If I could blame it on anybody, I would feel so much better. 내 탓이라서 더 너무 견디기 어려워요. 누구한테 탓을 할 수 있으면, 남 탓을 할 수 있으면 훨씬 내가 기분이 좋을 텐데. But what would you have done, Marilla, if you had been dared to walk a ridgepole? Marilla는 어떻게 했을 거예요? 누가 거기 걸어보라고 dare 했으면. I'd have stayed on good firm ground and let them dare away. Such absurdity, said Marilla. 나 같았으면 단단한 땅에 서서 마음대로 dare 하라고 했을 거야. Anne sighed. But you have such strength of mind, Marilla. Marilla, 당신은 정신력이 강해요. I haven't. I just felt that I couldn't bear Josie Pie's scorn. She would have crowed over me all my life. And I think I've been punished so much that you needn't be very cross with me, Marilla. It's not a bit nice to faint after all. And the doctor hurt me dreadfully when he was setting my ankle. I won't be able to go around for 6 or 7 weeks, and I'll miss the new lady teacher. She won't be new anymore by the time I'm able to go to school. And Gil, everybody will get ahead of me in class. Oh, I am an afflicted mortal. But I'll try to bear it all bravely, if only you won't be cross with me, Marilla. 이미 나는 너무 많이 혼났기 때문에 punished. 너무 많은 벌을 받았기 때문에 나한테 그렇게 화 안 내셔도 돼요. 뭐가 안 좋았죠? 기절하는 것도 안 좋았고 부러진 발목을 다시 이렇게 맞추는 게 엄청 아팠고 학교도 못 가고 7주 동안 그리고 새로운 선생님도 못 만나고 길버트와 포함 모든 사람들이 자기보다 더 학교에서 잘하게 될 것이고. There, I'm not cross, said Marilla. 누구를 이렇게 괜찮아. 알았어. 이렇게 위로할 때 there 이렇게 합니다. You're an unlucky child, there's no doubt about that. But as you say, you'll have the suffering of it. Here now, try and eat some supper. Isn't it fortunate I've got such an imagination? said Anne. 제가 상상력이 좋은 게 너무 다행 아니에요? It will help me through splendidly, I expect. What do people who haven't any imagination do when they break their bones, do you suppose, Marilla? 상상력 없는 사람은 뼈가 부러지면 어떻게 하는 것 같아요? 네, 그 당시에는 텔레비도 없었고 핸드폰 게임도 없었기 때문에 하는 말이겠죠. Anne had good reason to bless her imagination many a time and oft during the tedious 7 weeks that followed. But she was not solely dependent on it. She had many visitors, and not a day passed without one or more of the schoolgirls dropping in to bring her flowers and books and tell her all the happenings in the juvenile world of Avonlea. Everybody has been so good and kind, Marilla, sighed Anne happily, on the day when she could first limp across the floor. It isn't very pleasant to be laid up, but there is a bright side to it, Marilla. You find out how many friends you have. 이렇게 laid up, 꼼짝 못하고 다쳐서 하는 거는 안 좋지만 좋은 면도 있어요. 친구가 몇 명인지 알게 될 수 있어요. Why, even Superintendent Bell came to see me, and he's really a very fine man. Not a kindred spirit, of course, but still, I like him, and I'm awfully sorry I ever criticized his prayers. I believe now he really does mean them, only he has got into the habit of saying them as if he didn't. 네, 무슨 말일까요? Mr. Bell는 he has 일단 I'm awfully sorry I ever criticized his prayers. 기도를 안 좋게, 기도하는 거에 대해서 안 좋게 말한 거가 되게 후회된다. 왜냐? 이제 정말로 기도가 마음에 있는 말인 거를 내가 믿어. Only he has gotten into the habit of saying them as if he didn't. 근데 버릇이 기도를 할 때 그냥 정말로 자기 마음속에 있는 말이 아닌 것처럼 하는 버릇이 있어. I gave him a good broad hint. 내가 힌트를 드렸어요. I told him how hard I tried to make my own little private prayers interesting. He told me all about the time he broke his ankle when he was a boy. It does seem so strange to think of Superintendent Bell ever being a boy. Even my imagination has its limits, for I can't imagine that. When I try to imagine him as a boy, I see him with gray whiskers and spectacles, just as he looks in Sunday school, only small. Now, it's so easy to imagine Mrs. Allen as a little girl. Mrs. Allen has been to see me 14 times. Isn't that something to be proud of, Marilla? When a minister's wife has so many claims on her time. 그렇게 바쁜데 14번이나 왔어요. 목사의 부인이. She is such a cheerful person to have visit you, too. She never tells you it's your own fault, and she hopes you'll be a better girl on account of it. Mrs. Lynde always told me that when she came to see me, and she said it in a kind of way that made me feel she might hope I'd be a better girl, but didn't really believe I would. Even Josie Pie came to see me. I received her as politely as I could because I think she was sorry she dared me to walk a ridgepole. If I had been killed, she would have had to carry a dark burden of remorse all her life. Diana has been a faithful friend. She's been over every day to cheer my lonely pillow. But oh, I shall be so glad when I can go to school, for I've heard such exciting things about the new teacher. The girls all think she is perfectly sweet. Diana says she has the loveliest, fair, curly hair and such fascinating eyes. She dresses beautifully, and her sleeve puffs are bigger than anybody else's in Avonlea. Every other Friday afternoon, she has recitations, and everybody has to say a piece or take part in a dialogue. 네, recitation은 낭송입니다. 새로운 선생님이 너무 좋다는 얘기를 들었어요. Oh, it's just glorious to think of it. Josie Pie says she hates it, but that is just because Josie has so little imagination. Diana and Ruby Gillis and Jane Andrews are preparing a dialogue called A Morning Visit for next Friday. And the Friday afternoons they don't have recitations. Miss Stacy takes them all to the woods for a field day, and they study ferns and flowers and birds. And they have physical culture exercises every morning and evening. Mrs. Lynde says she never heard of such goings on, and it all comes of having a lady teacher. But I think it must be splendid, and I believe I shall find that Miss Stacy is a kindred spirit. There's one thing plain to be seen, Anne, said Marilla, and that is that your fall off the berry roof hasn't injured your tongue at all. 한 가지 확실한 거는 그 지붕에서 떨어져도 너의 혀는 부상을 당하지 않았어. 전혀 혀는 아무렇지도 않아. 멀쩡해. 너무 말을 잘합니다. All right, thank you for watching, everyone. I will see you next week. Good night.